Scott Loveridge with the North Central Regional Center for Rural Development, and we're pleased to be hosting today's webinar. Our presenters today are Linda Nave and Krista Hartsuk. Linda is an Extension Program Specialist at Iowa University, and as a specialist in horticulture, much of her work focuses on local food production, safety, and local food systems. Krista is an Extension Program Coordinator at Iowa State University, and as a small farms acreage living coordinator, she focuses on local food production, opportunities for farmers, and homesteading. Welcome, Linda and Krista. The floor is yours.
Oh, hi. Hi. Thanks, Scott. Thanks for this opportunity, and welcome everyone for participating in today's webinar. What we're going to be looking at today and talking about primarily are what is the economic impact of local foods in communities? What funding sources are selected communities that we studied using to support their local food systems? We'll go through some of the seven case studies that we used of communities in the Midwest to look at this, and then we'll conclude with the summary of the 10 best practices learned from this project when it comes to funding sources. Local foods is now more than just a popular catchphrase. It's become an important part of many communities. Proponents believe that the local food movement builds a healthy feedback loop wherein the community buys from local merchants who then reinvest in community via job creation, support local supplies, and much more. Michael Schumann, author and local foods advocate, says tremendous changes are beginning to take place in the way we eat and the way we produce our local foods. This is helping to catalyze the local food revolution. He refers to it as the local food shift. He believes rebuilding our local food systems is one of the most important strategies for strengthening our local communities. He also emphasizes that food localization can create new jobs and generate hundreds of millions of dollars in our new economic activity. An example of this is the 25% Shift project, which is organizing community food assessment and strategic planning processes in Boulder County, Colorado, for actually achieving that 25% food localization. This activity is going on throughout the Midwest in communities around our own state and states around us. Authors of the 2012 Economic Impacts of Iowa Regional Food Systems Working Group summarized their study by saying relocalizing the food system in new and innovative ways can help create jobs lost during the recession, increase retention of local food dollars, create stronger economy, and improve healthy outcomes. To achieve this, these efforts require resources, both human and financial resources, to make them happen. Sources of funding to strengthen and grow local food systems can come from both public and private sources and other sources. On the public side, local food systems have received attention of the national policymakers. Kathleen Merrigan, who was former Deputy Secretary of Agriculture, was a staunch supporter and advocate of local foods and a catalyst in the USDA's Know Your Farmer, Know Your Food initiative. She repeatedly said local food systems have big potential for job creation and economic opportunity. Since then, additional resources have been made available through the USDA, and we'll talk about many of those later in this presentation. This brings me to the project that we're reporting on today called Alternative Funding for Local Food System Development. This project was funded through a policy grant from the North Central Regional Center for Rural Development. The goal of this project is to increase awareness of various funding opportunities for sustainable local food systems in rural Midwest communities by presenting case studies of how communities and leaders in local food systems have found funding sources and strengthened their efforts. We looked at 7 different community-based local food system programs or projects in the Midwest to learn about how they planned, sought, and utilized various sources of funding. Some were small-scale seed projects that grew into larger programs, and some were successful, and others were just what we'd consider learning experiences. One of those successful projects was the Sioux City Farmers Market in the northwest corner of Iowa that also includes producers in South Dakota and Nebraska. This project was one that started with a goal of creating a farmers market that would serve producers in the area and provide a market and social venue for the greater Sioux City community area. With the work of passionate community residents and organizations, their original goal and plan grew as their ideas grew. This organization wrote and received a USDA Farmers Market Promotion Grant to implement their project. However, with the change in paid economic development staff, turnover, and the size and scope of that project, and it had become so big that it was like a balloon. When blown too full, it popped, and that's exactly what happened with this project. The passion for the project waned and eventually died. But fortunately, the Sioux City Buy Fresh Buy Local organization stepped in and were able to become the lead agency for the grant, and they went back to their original goal of establishing the farmers market. They sustained their project through donations and vendor fees. And the Sioux City Farmers Market organizers believe the stability and growth are very important to the survival and growth of their market. After the original grant funds were used, they solicited local businesses and community organizations for funds, and they received significant support from those sources. Vendor fees supported the paid part-time staff to serve as the market manager, who also maintains their website. Sponsor funds supported the market and promotional efforts. The Buy Fresh Buy Local board members estimate that the annual cost to operate their farmers market is approximately $65,000 a year. But the Sioux City Farmers Market has become more than just a market venue, particularly for the vendors. They've been happy with the growth of the market, and many have significantly grown their businesses through the market. For example, Coated Kernels is a specialty popcorn company. It started in a home kitchen and first marketed their product at the Sioux City Farmers Market in 2009. They now have a commercial kitchen and continue to sell at the market, but they've expanded their market for their product to include grocery stores and specialty stores. Through the growth of the startup businesses and increased market opportunities for farmers, the Sioux City Farmers Market has made an impact on the community. However, this really is not a unique outcome. A study conducted in the state of Iowa in 2010 estimated that the introduction of 152 farmers markets into the state economy led to the creation of 756 jobs, a $59.4 million increase in output, and a $17.8 million increase in income in the state of Iowa. Next project I'm going to talk about, a case study we did, was with the Northeast Iowa Food and Fitness Initiative. It also grew out of a need and was fueled by passionate community members, school administrators, and extension staff. Local community leaders in Northeast Iowa recognized the importance of agriculture and local food systems really before local foods became a household word. Farmers observed that even in the rural heartland of America, there was a real disconnect between the farm community and downtown businesses and community leaders. Like elsewhere in the country, many of the children in the area didn't know where their food comes from. Iowa State University Extension was asked to facilitate discussions around the current state of agriculture in Northeast Iowa. Northeast Iowa Food and Farm Coalition was formed. It's called the acronym NIF, and it was formed from those discussions. It was guided by a group of stakeholders, and the usual community members, including staff from Iowa State University Extension and Outreach. The NIF Coalition became the first pilot community selected in 2006 by the Leopold Center for Sustainable Agriculture's Regional Food Systems Working Group. The initial goals of the project were to provide an opportunity for existing and new producers to diversify, explore the development of regional food processing and storage facilities to add value to all agricultural products in the area, and to increase the consumption and sale of locally grown crops. At that time, the Leopold Center suggested the group go through a strategic planning process to identify the assets, their strengths and opportunities of the area, as well as the barriers and challenges. This strategic plan was instrumental in their first proposal to the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. In 2008, the Northeast Iowa Food and Fitness Initiative received $650,000 to initiate their program. And in 2011, the Kellogg Foundation again affirmed its support of their work with a 3-year implementation grant of $1.2 million. And this grant then provided opportunity to leverage and secure grants from other sources, including the Leopold Center, the Wellmark Foundation, the USDA, and the the Iowa Department of Transportation. As a result of the Northeast Iowa Food and Fitness Initiative and the grants provided from the Kellogg Foundation and others, the local foods are making an economic impact in Northeast Iowa. You can see the growth in locally grown food sales by farmers in Northeast Iowa by this chart, and the number of farmers reporting, and you can see that here with the dots, the little red dots indicating the number of farmers reporting in their study. The same can be seen with the increase in sales to institutions, schools, and other intermediate markets in Northeast Iowa. From less than $600,000 in sales in 2008 to over double that in 5 short years. The economic impact of the local foods in Northeast Iowa is reported in 2013. 26 farms added $8.6 million to the local economy. Teresa Weimerslag, the leader for the Northeast Iowa Food and Farm Coalition and Iowa State University Extension and Outreach Program Coordinator, has been a leading force in the success of this program. She says the demand for locally produced food, including fruits and vegetables as well as livestock products, have shown substantial growth, and buying and selling locally produced food revitalizes neighborhoods by creating and keeping jobs and money within the economy. Their report showed that the total number of new and expanded economic opportunities in the form of jobs expanded or created was nearly 154 in 5 years. In less than 10 years, the list of impacts and outcomes of the Northeast Iowa Food and Fitness Initiative is long and impressive. The core Food and Fitness Initiative leaders say that probably the most valuable impact of the project has been building relationships and sharing knowledge within and between the communities in their area. Region-wide team meetings involving representatives from county, school, and youth teams effectively disperse ideas and strategies throughout the larger area. Rather than reinventing the wheel, they found that communities can modify the success of other communities to fit their own unique needs. The next case study we looked at was a specific project sponsored by Dubuque Eats Well. Dubuque Eats Well is one of 15 groups in Iowa's Regional Food Systems Working Group network. These groups are comprised of geographically based practitioners and community leaders with a goal to increase the investment and support for local and regional food businesses in Iowa. DO, as it's referred to, became part of the Regional Food Systems Working Group in 2010 with a $6,000 grant funded through the Leopold Center. It serves several counties in northeast Iowa, Dubuque, Delaware, Jackson, and Jones counties, and is currently led and staffed by Iowa State University Extension and Outreach staff in Dubuque County. A project that they raised funds for was to build a greater awareness of the local food system from farm to table. Members of the Dubuque DO group felt that they needed to increase consumer awareness of their mission, and that included expanding local food production capacity in volume, the type of products they're selling, and improving food security and increasing the regional self-reliance of fresh seasonal fruits and vegetables. They learned from other regional food systems group that farm tours are often successful events that consumers and producers have used in the past. Brittany Bethel, the former DO Local Foods Coordinator, wrote and received a $2,500 Sustainable Dubuque grant from the City of Dubuque to support the region's first driftless farm crawl. And they use leverage money from sponsors and other activities to maintain their event. The proposed event for the driftless farm crawl aligned with the City of Dubuque's healthy food, regional economy, and community knowledge principles within the city's sustainable initiative. The Sustainable Dubuque grant funded road signs, bus rental to transport citizens with limited access to transportation. It provided assistance with marketing materials, t-shirts, educational materials, and food reimbursements for the farm samples that were given out at each farm. An additional $500 was raised through event sponsors. So the first driftless farm crawl, advertised as a free family event, took place on a Saturday afternoon in 2013 and included stops at 5 farms in eastern Iowa and southwest Wisconsin. Each farm hosted at least one scheduled tour during the day with demonstrations and educational information along the way. The farms were encouraged to sell their product on site during the event, and the average attendance at each farm site was about 50 people, with over 250 participating in the first year. The organizers of the farm crawl estimated the cost of hosting it was approximately $1,200. A farm-to-table dinner was also planned to take place the evening of the farm crawl. It was a 4-course dinner prepared by local chefs and featured locally produced items in each dish. It was held at the Tri-State Market Farm in East Dubuque, Illinois, and tickets sold for $65 apiece. The cap for the event was set at 60 guests, but the tickets sold out in 2 weeks prior to the event, and a total of 86 people were served that evening. The event brought in $1,600 in addition to what they raised with the Driftless Farm Crawl, and it supported the Dubuque Rescue Mission's Greenhouse Project. This is a community food project that provides meaningful work to homeless men who reside there for at least 9 months. Not only was a significant amount of money donated to the mission, but the Rescue Mission residents were vital to the event's success. They set the table services, the lighting and decorations for the dinner, and served the 4-course meal to all of the guests. This event not only built awareness for the local food system, but it also created a greater sense of community and raised funds to support another aspect of the broader local food system. The next project we looked at involved the grassroots development of a small local food hub. Community leaders in Boone County, Iowa, and Iowa State University Extension staff saw an opportunity to increase the use of local foods through 10 youth or family camps located in the county along the Des Moines River Valley, and an opportunity for local producers to get into the wholesale or institutional market by aggregating their product. The local camps serve more than 200,000 meals to youth and family campers, staff, and guests during a brief 10-week peak summer season. The goal of this project was to increase the use of fresh local produce at the camps, add nutritional value to their meals, and include locally sourced foods and promotional materials. In addition, it would also support the local producers in the area. The planning group used that information to write a rural business enterprise grant called an RBEG and offered it through the USDA Development Program in Iowa and received $56,000 to support the development of this small food hub to aggregate produce for the camps and other local institutions such as restaurants and sororities in the area. The farmers involved in that infrastructure were already in place because they had high tunnels to provide for season extension and supply the specific narrow market window for the camps that they needed between the months of June and mid-August. The aggregator for the group soon learned that the camp's limited menu didn't offer much opportunity for the necessary sale of the quantity of fresh vegetables needed, even for their salad bars. It's most economic for the camps to purchase large bags of pre-chopped iceberg lettuce that can go directly from the bag to the salad bar. Although the grant did allow some incentive dollars to compensate the camps for their additional labor required for processing this locally grown product, it wasn't enough to change their ways of doing things. A few camps that did try the locally grown lettuce received positive feedback from their campers on the high quality and flavor of the lettuce, but others said, children just won't eat dark leafy greens. This project was not as sustainably successful as some of the others that we had studied. There are a few reasons for this. One is the funding to build the food hub covered one complete growing season, and only one season, which wasn't long enough to really build up relationships and buying and production schedules. This small-scale grassroots food hub could not afford to pay an aggregator to cover the time and shrinkage required to market and deliver a quality product. And there were some positive outcomes that came from this besides some of the negative things. Relationships grew between the farmers and new market opportunities opened for the farmers both individually and collectively. For example, one of the farmers took over and began producing and delivering products to 2 of the 10 camps. So some of the things still continued on as a result of the project, but the food hub found it just couldn't make it swing with the limited amount of funding without going after additional resources. I'm going to turn the program over to Krista Hartsock now, and she's going to finish out talking about the rest of the case studies that we looked at, as well as go through our 10 best practices.
Thank you, Linda. The next project that we looked at was Lone Tree Foods. Lone Tree Foods is a farmer-owned business dedicated to sustainable, safe, and humane practices. The original goal was to help producers expand into new markets, increase access to local foods for professional buyers, and build a united, community-based food system. Lone Tree Foods began with discussions among farmers in southwest Iowa who wanted to get into those wholesale markets like restaurants and grocery stores. They wanted to work together to eventually aggregate and distribute product together, reaching higher volumes and expanding beyond their own farmers market sales. 5 original producers met on a monthly basis and created info sheets for buyers with seasonal availability. The group originally decided on an unincorporated network with the goal of forming an LLC by the end of the grant funding period. Funding for Lone Tree Foods came from a variety of sources. A Rural Community Development Initiative grant was used to hire a program manager on a part-time basis to form and manage the local food producers group, with the original mission of assisting these producers in southwest Iowa and southeast Nebraska to meet the demands of wholesale accounts. Increase local food consumption in the Council Bluffs, Omaha, and Lincoln areas, and establish connections between producers and wholesale buyers. Additionally, this group went after a Cliff Bar Foundation grant, a small grant that was used in the initial startup. And the Leopold Center for Sustainable Agriculture paid for Anthony Flacavento, who's a consultant and public speaker, to meet with the growers and really help them establish a mission and overall vision for the project. Grant funding for this project will expire this month. For this season, the growers decided on a 10% fee for all sales that was collected by the Lone Tree Foods manager for costs and additional support for the project. Meetings with legal advisors are underway to formalize the structure to an LLC. The farmers in the project found a need to refocus on grocery stores and institutional accounts. Relationships with restaurants were too well established by individual farmers and were not as successful for the whole group. Our next project was Eat Greater Des Moines. Eat Greater Des Moines was organized in January 2009 as the Healthy Urban Food and Farming Working Group, or HUF, to collaborate on a planning grant for a community food project. Although the grant was not funded, the stakeholders involved recognized the positive connections that were formed, and they continue to meet, working closely with Healthy Polk 2020, a widespread effort focusing on health and wellness in Polk County, Iowa. In September of 2012, the group adopted its current name, Eat Greater Des Moines, and the mission statement to develop a sustainable, replicable food system for accessing local and healthy foods for all income levels of the Central Iowa Foodshed, involving residents, producers, distributors, educators, and entrepreneurs. Eventually, the group put together a proposal to the Health Cabinet of the United Way to fund a local food coordinator, supporting efforts in community gardens throughout the development of a community garden startup guide, and then mapping those community gardens and community-supported agriculture available in the Polk and surrounding areas. The funding for this first initial position was then expanded into 1.5 positions, and a community foundation grant established a strategic planning session for the organization, as well as a formalized structure that exists today. Current membership of Eat Greater Des Moines consists of more than 20 organizations and individuals from a wide cross-section of the community. 5 focus areas direct the group through policy, health and nutrition, access and hunger, community outreach, and business development. Eat Greater Des Moines makes connections, meeting with all organizations and entities working in local foods in Polk County and the surrounding areas, leading to new connections in food rescue, food waste systems, overall visibility of the project, and increased communications among all stakeholders. According to Director Aubrey Martinez, Eat Greater Des Moines sees their role as that connecting piece. She says, "We're convening groups quarterly with 45 to 50 people in attendance, and new connections are made each time. This group finds out what this group over here is working on, and suddenly they both realize they could partner together to advance the project, the true goal and success of the program." The next project we looked at was the Food and Finance Institute, born out of the Willie Street Co-op in Madison, Wisconsin. As we all know, the local food scene in Madison has long been a model for communities throughout the United States. Consumers in the area are committed to purchasing local, and producers of local food are continually expanding operations and sourcing new marketing avenues. Enter then the Slow Money movement in Wisconsin. Slow Money is a national movement to organize investors and donors to steer new sources of capital to small food enterprises. The Slow Money chapter here fueled the local foods movement and additional growth in the industry. The Willie Street Co-op was an early adopter of buying local foods and has continually expanded to 2 different locations. As a result of their grower survey, Willie Street Co-op owners had an idea to create a revolving loan fund for their growers. Growers had an interest in expanding operations and providing additional products to the co-op, but capital was a limiting factor commonly listed. Willie Street Co-op's new $100,000 local vendor fund will support sustainable growth of local food companies, starting with a pilot program this winter. An average loan likely will range from $25,000 to $30,000, in contrast to the typical microloan of less than $10,000 from other local food funds. The pilot program this winter will probably include up to 4 loans. Since 1992, the Willie Street Co-op Community Reinvestment Fund has contributed $283,000 to making a difference in the quality of life for the community by supporting developmental projects, educational projects, and events that are consistent with Willie Street Co-op's goals. In addition to the technical assistance and financial assistance that comes from this new lender fund, the peer groups are being formed to establish peer mentoring. This gets everyone understanding the full realm of business. And that brings us to our 10 best practices. So what are these best practices we learned? First, the project must fit with the mission and objectives of the funding agency or organization. Define the goals of your project or program, and then seek a funding source that supports that type of program or activity that you are proposing. Next, utilize a grant writer for large grants. Select someone with grant writing experience and success, whether it is a passionate volunteer or a paid professional grant writer. Third, don't overlook USDA grants because they appear overwhelming and competitive. The 2014 Farm Bill has given USDA new tools, resources, and authority to support the rural economy. A great example of this is the Local Food, Local Places initiative, which has $650,000 available for communities in 2014. Under this effort, a team of agricultural, transportation, environmental, and regional economic experts will work directly with local communities to develop comprehensive strategies that use local food systems to meet a variety of needs. Communities are invited to submit a letter of interest to no more than 2 pages that describes the community's needs and goals related to local food and the revitalization of downtowns and traditional neighborhoods. The original deadline of July 15th for these awards is being extended. And back to our best practices. For number 4, small community grants and foundation grants are a great starting point for funding. Look outside the box for funding partners through national foundations and within your community. Local business, corporate sponsors, community organizations, and nonprofits are often willing to invest in their community. Don't rely on just one grant for single funding. Nearly all of the community local foods programs that were studied in this project sought multiple funding sources ranging from government, nonprofit, and organizations to initiatives to sustain their programs. 6. Our next best practice involved hiring a program manager. Many programs aren't sustainable unless there is leadership and continuity within the program or project. Programs dissolve when they are coordinated by an agency staff member or volunteer who may change jobs or assignments, move, or lose interest. But that being said, don't put all aspects of the program itself on a single manager. Program and project managers need support from a stable core team and a structure for the group to thrive and avoid burnout. 8. Use a diverse group to create a common vision for the program to continue moving forward. However, don't let the central decision-making group become too large so that little is accomplished and no forward direction is continued. 9. When several communities are involved in a visionary project together, a trusting and inclusionary atmosphere must be created at the beginning. Establish that shared vision right away. Small rural communities that are often in competition for resources can greatly benefit by working together. Discussions, plans, and budgets must be transparent among all participants. And finally, when you are initially planning a local food system for your community, start with one event and expand from there. Don't let it become so large that you miss the objectives of that original intent. Our case studies and our best practices are both listed on our website at extension.iastate.edu/value-added-ag. At this time, we are willing to take any questions, if there are any from the group, and we want to thank you for your time.
Well, thanks for a great overview and ride through a wonderful set of community case studies. I appreciated listening to it. And I guess one thing on funding that's come up in the time between when this webinar was scheduled today, that the 4 regional rural development centers are partnering with the Agricultural Marketing Service of the USDA to work on making available to folks that are interested in local food promotion programs. They have they're planning to announce a farmers market promotion program and a local food promotion program. These are grants of up to $100,000. It's like there'll be 30 million available nationally for that program. So if you're interested in getting to know, kind of how to apply for all those grants to be successful for it, be in touch with your regional rural development center to find out who the contact might be for your region. So we're here in the North Central region, but the other 3 centers are also involved with that project. So, and we have some questions that came in.
I see that.
So,
Ryan's got a question on the Slow Food Revolving Loan Fund in Wisconsin. He asks, where did the initial funding come from to establish the fund? Ryan, that came primarily from a lot of philanthropy donations. They really went out and sought those donations from local philanthropists to start that fund and kind of utilize that as their catalyst for branching out from there.
I had a question too in listening to it. You talked a couple times about fees. To what extent is that feasible, and under what conditions can one begin to think about fees to sort of, I assume that at some point some of the funding agencies are going to want to say, you're launched and you need to live on your own, and so when do you introduce fees, and what are kind of the signals that you're ready for fees?
That's a great question. Lone Tree Foods was really the first one that we interviewed that was collecting fees from their actual growers themselves, and this was their first season utilizing that. But before their initial grant funding expired here in September, they wanted to have that base of funding there to see how much they were collecting, how much sales they had this growing season, and then utilize those funds for kind of that legal structure discussion, meeting with attorneys for some of those type of fees, before they really then launched into a formalized LLC structure going into the 2015 growing season. So this was their 3rd season of growing together. It was going to be their final season of actual funding. I'm not sure if there's a good baseline that says when you should start collecting fees, but they really felt like they had their core group of producers that were loyal to the project and going to be involved long term.
Okay. It's like people are typing, so what about getting started? You mentioned, I like this notion of kind of a small event. That's kind of a neat way to get this started. What would be kind of an ideal event to think about?
Chris and I just switched microphones here, so could you repeat the question?
Sure. Sir, kind of if you're kind of that budding startup operation and you're talking about that event that you had suggested in your 10 best practices, what would be kind of the ideal type of event to get started?
It would be a single-day event, or such as the Dubuque Eats Well Farm Food Crawl, or a local bike ride from farm to farm. One single event to build awareness, to get the community to rally around that, and from there build on that particular project. Add certain features to it. Perhaps the community already has a farmer's market. Include the event with the farmer's market. Include some of the institutions that are buying locally produced product. So encourage all the community participants, not just community residents, but some of the businesses that are involved. Could be grocery stores that could be a sponsor of this. I see the question was, I see there's $65,000 needed for the Sioux City Farmers Market to operate their market. Why was it so expensive? Salary of the market manager, salary of the market manager, the rental of the space, the insurance, the website development, general marketing. It all costs money, and they found it did cost them that much money just to maintain the market.
And I've got the evaluation up for folks if you want to click in on how you felt about this. A couple more questions are coming in.
Okay. Talking about starting up a community garden. We kind of lost you there.
I'm going to expand the chat so you can.
Oh, there we go. Liability insurance for and starting source of funds, particularly it's a community garden for adults, families, or is it a community children's garden? That's a question that I want to know. But there are startup monies available through community groups and organizations. I would suggest maybe starting with your local town through the park and recreation program, and other activities such as that would be my first. And I would definitely consider using community land regarding liability and insurance. Yeah, adults, families, and children. So definitely go through your local community park and recreation or your public works. Okay.
Sharon recommends a film. That's a great resource. Thanks for sharing that, Sharon.
There are a lot of good resources out there. National Community Gardening Association, they can help direct you to some of the funds that they've found are effective for establishing community gardens. It's a National Community Gardens Association. Okay, obviously. Ryan mentioned too that more than just growers are involved. You need to rally community leaders, other interested individuals besides just the producers. You need to have somebody else become your cheerleader for the local foods, and I think that's what he was mentioning there, or emphasizing. What kind of things might grants cover to support local foods? Primarily, like we talked about with Dubuque Eats Well and Eat Greater Des Moines, it supports the continuity and the bringing together of various groups. And I think that's what the Des Moines Eats Well group did extremely, not to meet Dubuque, Eat Greater Des Moines does very well, is they seem to be the conduit that brings all of these groups together. Imagine it as a big pipe, and that's what Eat Greater Des Moines is. And in that pipe are all these different wires from all the different food groups that are working together, or working separately, excuse me, in the Des Moines area. They bring them all together so that they're not duplicating services, they're assisting each other. And I think that's a lot what some of the funding sources will do, is help bring people together for one common cause. It will also help promote economic development within the community, as in the Dubuque Eats Well did the the Driftless Farm Crawl and the food meal. Community residents and community businesses really rally around those type of things, and that just provides money to support future projects, and that's what they have found. They've raised enough money so that the program is sustaining itself through those funds. This liability coverage. I've got to tell you, I'm not real well versed on liability coverage. Amber says the city is requiring $1 million liability, $1 million policy to use park land. When you think about, it sounds like a lot of money to have a $1 million liability clause, but when you think you're only using it for 3 to 4 months, the cost isn't as high as you might think.
Again, if folks haven't already filled out the little evaluation, I think that'd be helpful to get your feedback back to our presenters. Looks like the questions have slowed down. There's comment from our presenters, but I think maybe our audience is coming to the end of their questions. So I'll try to speak up a little bit here. But I appreciate your talk today, and I think it covers a really nice range of communities, and look forward to hearing more about what you'll be doing in the future. Oh, one last question about the naysayers. You want to answer that one?
How do you break?
While you're thinking about that, University of Illinois, you just click on the squares and that registers it. You don't have to click submit. So when you see the check mark on your box, it's submitted.
That's a good question. How do you lead a horse to water? I guess, any comments, Krista, on that? Yes. Take a look at some of your other stakeholders besides your economic development groups. Look at some of the businesses in the area, those who really serve to gain from the project. And then take that information, those statistics, back to your economic development groups to show that, yes, we have a lot of stakeholders involved, a lot of participants in this project.
Looks like maybe one more person is typing. We'll just give a second for that. And again, if you haven't filled out the evaluation, just click on the boxes and that will register. Looks like we're done.